Hello, everyone, and welcome back to episode 3 of the Drew Kennington Show. Coming to you live from the 317, good old Indianapolis, Indiana. Once again, it is gray, cold, and still snowy here in Indianapolis. But Puxatony Phil, Mr. Groundhog himself, did see a shadow, so that means we got 6 more weeks of this. Allegedly, even though when you look that up, he's only right 37% of the time. Why do we still do that? I don't know. Yeah, we got a fun-filled episode for you guys today. We're recording a little earlier than we usually do. It's Super Bowl Sunday, so got some fun-filled activities, I guess, we got to get into later this afternoon. So I want to get this one in the can and go on about our day and watch the big Super Bowl. Is it the 60th? I think 60th Super Bowl. So that's exciting. Anything exciting off the top here that I want to get into? I tried to make pancakes this morning. That didn't go very well. It's kind of like, what happened to me this morning was kind of like when you make a bowl of cereal, and after you pour the bowl, you realize you don't have any milk. It's exactly what happened to me this morning. I make the batter. I have all the ingredients. Everything's ready to go. Last ingredient is melted butter. Go to the fridge to get said melted butter. We don't have any butter. Cool. So I look up, some substitutes, figure out what we need. I'm like, all right, there's like 2 or 3 options we got. We don't have any of that. So it said, you could maybe use Greek yogurt. So I used Greek yogurt. It didn't work. I made hockey pucks. They sucked. So we had to go buy pancakes. Not the best start to the morning, but we powered through. I guess on the topic of food blunders, I ordered Chipotle last night for dinner. They didn't put any rice in the bowl. I'm like halfway through the bowl. I'm kind of eating it. I'm like, man, this is good, but something's off here. Do a little bit of investigative journalism on the bowl there, and there's no rice in it. Cool. Thanks, guys. Preach. So that's, now we're in the phase of the Chipotle experience where I'm not going to have it for like 2 months. Because, I don't know if you guys are like this, but with me, it's I eat Chipotle, and then it's like I want it every single weekend. I want it damn near every day. And then you just get that one mid bowl, or something just goes wrong. Or maybe, for me, usually it upsets my stomach, or, something like that, and then you just don't have it for like 3 months, and then 3 months goes by, and you're like, yo. You guys ever heard of Chipotle? So I guess that's the food segment of the show. I want to start off this episode by putting a hand up. I want to, like when an NBA player fouls someone, they put their hand up and they tap their chest. That's what we got here to start the show off. I just want you guys to know, and I want to be openly honest, I did not like last episode. I didn't like it. I listened back to it. It was okay. But I mentioned that I was very nervous going into it, and I was, and maybe it was just me, but I could sense that I was holding back, and I was just kind of yapping, I kind of just talked for an hour just to kind of like get through it. I wasn't really trying to put out the best episode I could put out. It was mainly just get through this episode, and I wasn't proud of it. I guess I was proud for the fact that I got it out, but I wasn't very proud. I'm going to turn this mic down a little bit. Wasn't very proud with the finished product. And I also clicked my tongue a lot. I don't know if you guys picked up on that, but I did. And I every time before I'd say something, I'd go like, oh man. Every time I heard that, I got so fired up. I was listening to it back, and I thought it would be like, we're like 10 minutes in, and it would just kind of stop. And then it just kept going, and it frustrated me so much. I wanted to delete the whole episode when I was listening to it back, but I was like, you can't do that. It's only episode 2. You can't skip an episode on the second episode. So we kind of just had to let that one be and see what it was. And I was speaking on how anxious I was going into it, I was like very, very, very anxious. Like obviously I'm still new to this, and I've only done a total, I think this is like technically the eighth episode, eighth or ninth episode, like technically. I did five or six practice episodes, and then I had a really, really good fifth episode that I felt really good about. And then I was like, all right, well, let's just go live with it. So obviously I'm still pretty new and pretty nervous to this, but I'd never been that anxious before recording one of these. And I kind of spent some time thinking, like, why was I so anxious? And I think it's because the first episode, it did better than I thought it was going to. I mentioned in the second episode that I thought I was only going to get like 10 to 15 plays or listens, and I ended up getting, I think between YouTube and Spotify, it was like over like around like 75. So it was a lot more than I thought. And the week leading up to episode 2, I was like so in my own head about like, oh, you need to follow it up. Like, oh man, I went from nobody listening to 75 people listening. So it was like, oh, I gotta follow. I gotta pick the best topics. What do the people want to hear? And I had a little outline of what I wanted, and I got all my quote unquote topics, and it wasn't things I really cared about. It was mainly just things that I felt like people wanted to hear. And I wasn't very comfortable because I wasn't talking about things I cared about. I was talking about things I thought other people would want to care about. And for me, it was very obvious to see going into that didn't give a good finished product. And I want to focus more on delivering a good finished product than I focus on, whether or not people care about what I'm talking about. Because at the end of the day, if you want to hear takes on current events or takes on anything, bro, there's so many podcasts out there. You can go and pick a podcast, and I'm sure they're going to talk about whatever it is that you want to hear. So if I just go around and take the topics that everyone else is talking about or that I think everybody else wants to listen to, I'm just like everybody else, and I don't have a unique show. And the thing that makes this show unique is me. You can't find me anywhere else. You can find someone talking about whatever we talked about last episode. Pick a topic, Kanye, Trump, whatever. You can find someone talking about that. That's not hard to find. But what is hard to find is me, the individual. The host of the show is the uniqueness of it. So yeah, just moving forward, I want to speak on things that I care about, that make me comfortable, and I'm going to focus less on just speaking on whatever the current hot topic is, because as I get more comfortable doing this and as I further figure out the identity of this show, what I talk about is going to change. And I didn't really mention this in the first episode, but these blinds keep swaying back and forth. I didn't really mention this in the first episode, but one of the main reasons I even started this was because I feel like in today's culture, like we lack understanding. And when I come on here and I talk about whatever, I don't feel like I'm like doing anything for anybody. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like I'm just like rambling, trying to put an hour together to put out there. And I don't want this to become a show where I talk about whatever hot topic is of the day and then I clip it and put it on social media, and that's all this is. It's just me trying to get views, me trying to bring you in and talk about bullshit for an hour, get a few clips and be like, dust my hands and be like, on to the next one. I want people to like come here and have some fun. I want them to laugh. I want them to enjoy what they're listening to, but I also want them to maybe have a new perspective on some things, because I feel like personally I'm in a unique position with how I grew up and where I find myself now, to where I can give some perspective on certain things that maybe you couldn't find elsewhere. And like what I mean by that is, I feel like we are so divided currently, and I think it is because of the lack of understanding. And I said I wasn't going to talk. Well, I didn't tell you guys this, but I told myself I wasn't going to talk politics in this episode. But somehow, some way, it always finds its way into the episode. But we're in a very interesting time in America where it seems like everyone is kind of at each other's necks, and everyone is so divided. And I feel like the biggest proponent in that is lack of understanding for the other side. And I feel like from my own personal experiences, I have experienced both sides. I grew up in rural Indiana. I grew up in a rural area in a red state. That's like peak conservatism area, whatever. When you think of the quote unquote conservatives, that's who I grew up around. Those are my friends. Those are my family. I know those people. I understand them. I know how they think. I know why they feel a certain way about things, and so on and so forth. And now I find myself currently in, I moved to the city, the big city, the bright lights. I live in downtown Indianapolis, and I found myself being around, the quote unquote liberals. I'm in an interracial relationship. I find myself, I'm friends with gay people. I find myself hanging out, like around immigrants, and then like exposed to these like hot topic liberal people. You know what I mean? And yeah, you get to meet them, you get to understand them, you see where they're coming from, how they feel about how they feel, why they feel the way they feel. And so I feel like whenever there's this political back and forth, this at each other's necks, I just kind of look at it as like, yeah, but like, it's because you don't understand the other side. You listen to you when you view it from an outside perspective, you can see how people are so divided, and it is very simple. It's because if you are a small town person, right? You live in rural Indiana, where I grew up. You don't have much interactions or experience with really many people outside of your community, and your community is a predominantly white, conservative, sometimes religious, little group. And so if you don't have any experience with, gay people, with immigrants, with minorities, the only information you get on these people is from the media. And a lot of us, whether we know it or not, have trained our algorithms to feed us media that propagates our own views. It further solidifies our own views on whatever it is we feel. So if it's right-leaning stuff, you're getting a bunch of right-leaning media, and the media's job is to get you to click, get you riled up. So what they do is they paint images and pictures of these quote unquote liberals and or gay people, immigrants, whatever, pick whatever you want to throw in there. They paint a picture of these people, and the only information you're getting on these people is from the media. And they typically take the most radicalized version of these people. So you think in your mind is, oh my God, these people are insane. How could you ever be like that? How could you ever live like that? How could you ever think that that's okay? And it's the inverse as well. You live in a big city. You don't have much interaction with, rural conservative people, or even just conservative people in general. You're kind of in your little liberal bubble. And once again, you consume left-leaning media, which then causes you to paint this picture of your quote-unquote opposition as these like super racist, super whatever people. And it dehumanizes them. You view them more as this like radicalized entity than you do as a human being. And I feel like something I want to try to do with this show is find that middle ground of understanding to where, you know, if you're a super left leaning person, maybe you can realize the right aren't these racist monsters, and vice versa. If you're a super right leaning person, maybe you can come here and listen to like, okay, maybe, you know, maybe the liberal, hey, maybe they're humans too. Because I think the reality is we're much more alike than we are different. But the problem is with media is they want to focus on our differences, and they pick the most polarizing differences so that way that we are at each other's necks. We are divided, and it causes more uproar, which then causes more attention to the media. Or I mean, even if you want to kind of put the tinfoil hat on for a second, which I don't even think it's a tinfoil hat, like a conspiracy theory or whatever, but it's like the political parties use it to help, you know, get their like power or whatever. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but it's very clear that politicians do it, where they take the most polarizing topic that you disagree on with the other side, and then they run with it as like that's their whole campaign thing, which then causes more division, which then causes you to lean more into your side because, oh my gosh, oh, insert polarizing topic that the opposition feels differently than you about, you know, you lean more into your side because you're like, oh, I can't believe they feel like that. You know, they're insane, blah, blah, blah. And the reality is most people don't really care about that topic, but the politicians run with it, and then it gets you all fired up, and that's their whole goal. So yeah, I hope that I can, you know, be a bridge, I guess, between those two sectors. And I was on a roll. I lost I lost my train of thought. I'm not gonna lie to you. I just lost my train of thought. I was kind of on a roll. But yeah, basically, I just want to be able to just kind of give an objective perspective and try to bring people together instead of add to the division. You know, add to the separation. And yeah, maybe we could all be chill. We could all. I guess that's what I also want to say is because you don't have to completely agree with somebody. And I feel like that's the problem is when we don't agree with somebody, we don't even try to understand them. So I guess maybe that's the message here is you don't have to agree with everybody, but at least try to understand them. Man, I thought I had some more juice on that. I'll be honest. I had some more sauce on that one, but I don't know what happened. I just completely lost my train of thought. Um, but while we're on the topic of, I guess, somewhat, you know, political stuff, and like I said, coming into this week, I had no intention of talking politics this week because I feel like the first two episodes, I spent a lot of time, like, kind of dogging Trump, and I don't know, like I said, I don't want that to be my whole shtick, you know? I don't want to come on here and just, like, whatever bullshit he's been up to, just come on here and start bad. I don't know. Like, that's not really what I'm trying to do. But then Friday night happened, and I'm chilling on the couch with my fiance, and we have this little tradition where Friday nights we have this thing we call Fun Dinner Friday, and it's where we just go get some like bullshit dinner. You know, we eat pretty healthy throughout the week, but Friday nights is the night where it's like calories don't exist. What do we want for dinner? You know, what snacks, what candy? You know, get a little crazy. Maybe eat a little diet soda. You know, get super silly. And what we do is we eat our food and then we chill on the couch and we watch TikTok. She uses her iPad, puts it on the TV, and that's usually the only TikTok I watch throughout the week because I use Instagram Reels, and I'm like a little kid. I only give myself 30 minutes of screen time a day with Instagram. So I don't really be on short form content like that. But every Friday we hop on TikTok, and that's where I get my fix. We're chilling, we're scrolling, and all of a sudden I see a Candace Owens video pop up. And I don't know much about Candace Owens. The only thing I really know, before this whole Charlie Kirk situation, the only thing I knew about Candace Owens is that she was black and that she was a Republican, and black people did not like that. That's all I knew. I hate the idea of political influencers, so I don't listen to anybody, left or right, that's a quote unquote political influencer. Nah, I'm cool off that. So I knew nothing on her. I'd never even seen any of her stuff, but I knew of her. And then, the whole Charlie Kirk situation happened, and again, I didn't really tap into any of her stuff, but I know what's going on. Where I had seen things and heard things about how she's been like a very strong advocate into this whole idea that, I think it was like Israel had something to do with Charlie Kirk's assassination or murder or whatever. And, when it first all went down, I was pretty tapped into it, trying to cause I was like, oh my God, this is crazy. But as time went on, I was just like, I don't really care. But she's still going. And then, there was stuff, now there's like beef between her and Erica Kirk. And again, didn't tap into it. I loosely knew about it. But anyway, what I'm getting at here is we're scrolling through TikTok, and all I see is Candace Owens. And she just goes, hey, Erica. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Wait a minute. So we watched the first probably 30 seconds of it. We're getting into it. And Naomi looks at me and she goes, are we interested in this? No hesitation. I'm glued to the screen. I go, yes. I was like, I need to know what this is about. So we watched the entire video. And let me tell you, this shit's crazy. I don't know if you guys have watched it. If you care or even interested in anything with this whole Charlie Kirk situation, I strongly suggest you watch it, because it was some of the most insane things that I had ever heard, I guess. No, that's a very large statement to make. It was crazy. It wasn't the craziest thing I've ever heard, but it was crazy. I'll leave it at that. And it was basically her kind of like laying out the evidence, laying out the blueprint as to how that foreign governments got involved and were basically involved in Charlie Kirk's assassination. How she thinks that she thinks that basically what she said is Charlie Kirk had a meeting with Netanyahu, and Netanyahu wanted to take Turning Point USA to the next level, but Charlie Kirk said no. And she thinks that I don't know, like angered or something the Israeli government, because then shortly after that he gets whacked, and then lo and behold, Erica Kirk goes in and signs this deal. I don't know. It was crazy. There's like the French were involved. So basically, I'm doing a really bad job at explaining this. I know that. I'm very sorry. But basically, like the French were involved. There's this French billionaire who's bankrolling Turning Point USA with billions of dollars. Israel's involved. And basically, Charlie Kirk wanted nothing to do with it. So he was like, nah, I'm cool. And they took him out. And then Erica Kirk comes in and she signs all these deals, gets all this money. And now Turning Point USA is this massive entity, that we see today. They're doing stadium shows. They're doing all this extra stuff. And when you learn that, it's kind of insane, because something that a lot of people have kind of mentioned or I guess brought up in this whole thing is that how Erica Kirk, there's like the memes. It's like Erica Kirk never more doesn't mourn him, whatever, blah blah blah. And see the conspiracies, man, the tinfoil hat's coming on, because then it's like she like kind of infiltrated the company. She kind of marries the guy. Her parents are CIA or whatever they were. They were some sort of intelligence agency. They were like CIA or something. So she like grew up around people who knew how to like do mind control. She goes in, she infiltrates this government. She had a connection with Trump when she was a teenager. A lot to unpack in regards to that. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is, if you are a big fan of Turning Point USA, if that's like your bread and butter, maybe go watch the Candace Owens video with an open mind, and maybe just kind of realize that this might be a government psyop and they might be using it to control the population. I'm not saying they are. I'm just saying something weird's going on there. There's governments involved that, maybe shouldn't be involved in American religious sectors. And it just seems like maybe old Charlie Kirk was the sacrifice for all of this to transpire. So yeah, maybe don't support that. Yeah, because I could do like a whole thing on how I feel about that, but I'm not going to, because I don't want to. And like I said, I didn't even want to talk politics, but we're already like halfway through the show, and I've spent the whole time damn near talking about politics. So yeah, we're gonna leave it at that. Yeah, maybe just look into it a little bit, and maybe if you, I don't know, just look into it. That's all we'll leave it at. We're gonna change the vibe, because I'm tired of talking about that type of stuff. I want to have something fun. I want to talk, some silliness. Talk about some things that, like I said at the beginning of the show, that I care about, and that would be the NBA trade deadline. Yes, we are finally talking hoops on this show. 3 episodes deep. Even in my 5 or 6 practice episodes, I don't think I ever talked hoops. So I'm finally getting the opportunity to talk some ball. Oops, sorry. Which before... Sorry, I had to take a water break. Before we get too deep into that, I actually did play basketball yesterday. Well, I played about a month ago, but before that, it'd been years. And I played in this like exhibition game. Like, it was like a kind of like a legit game. So that was cool. It was against like a Filipino based team, and they weren't very tall. So I'm 6'3", so young Drewski had to run the 5, and my play style, I don't ball. I don't hoop like that. I'm not a capital H hooper. I'm more of like a, yeah, I'll come and join. And my problem that I always seem to run into is that I am tall. I guess I'm pickup basketball tall. Obviously, I'm not tall in the grand scheme of hoops. Like, if you put me on like a rec league team, I'm probably not that tall. But if I'm just pulling up to the park or the rec center, I'm tall. I'm quick. I'd say I have an athletic build. So when people see me, they tend to think that I'm good at basketball. And I've ran into this many times where I go to the park or I go to the rec center, and you'll shoot for captains, whatever, and you'll pick teams. I always end up getting picked first. And that would be like a cool, like little, ego boost. Like, oh yeah, picked first, I'm that guy. If I didn't suck at basketball, like I said, I'm quick. I'm pretty good on defense. I can jump decently high. But you give me the ball, I'm airballing threes. I'm blowing wide open layups. Like I can barely dribble, like I'm not that good at basketball. So people waste the number one pick on me, and then I'm like, bro, now they're mad because they picked a chump. But so I was running the 5 yesterday, and what I was trying to get at is my play style is not that of a center. I'm tall, but I'm like 180 pounds. I'm not like that big of a guy. So you get thrown down low with like these 225, 250 pound dudes who may be shorter than you, but they're some big bodies. And they're just kind of low-key pushing me around, you know what I mean? And now I got to like try to post these guys up. Like, man, I can't do that. I know my role. I'm the white guy that stands in the corner. And I'm a spot up. I'm ready to catch the ball. I may set you a screen or two. I may cut. But for the most part, I go to the corner. I wait for my time to catch the ball and shoot. And like I said, I don't got a shot. So I typically airball it. So I'm basically useless on offense. And where I make up for it is I hustle really hard on defense. That's my role. So you got me running the 5. Not a high success right there. But I had fun. I really do enjoy playing basketball. I think if I was more consistent with it, I actually would be somewhat decent. But back to the NBA trade deadline and why I haven't really talked hoops. It's because the Pacers suck this year. I'll be frank and I'll be honest with you. Obviously expected. Halliburton's out. We've dealt with a lot of injuries this year, but it's hard for me to be tapped into the league when I am low-key rooting for my team to lose every night. I want AJ DeBonsa. I want Darren Peterson. I want Cam Boozer. I want one of those guys. So, yeah, I want the boys to lose. So it's hard to, watch them and not just be like when we win, I'm, a little salty, I'm like, fuck. Why did we win that? Why did we beat the Raptors? You know what I mean? Why didn't we just lose, bro? Keep losing. I was like, oh, my God, we're on a 3-game win streak. It's such a weird experience. So I haven't really been tapped into hoops. But I was pretty tapped into this trade deadline. And there was a few trades that I kind of want to talk about. We'll get to the Zubac. Is it Zubac or Zubac? Because I've heard both. I've heard people say Zubac. I've heard people say Zubac. We'll just call him the Big Z. Old Big Z to Indy. We'll get into that one. But I think where I want to start is whatever the hell is going on in Washington, D.C. What are the Wizards doing? I'll be honest. I get it. They've been bad ever since John Wall and Bradley Beal broke up. They've been a dumpster fire. And so I understand the idea of wanting to kind of get your name in the mix, wanting to give the fans something to be excited about. But, I feel like the way they're going about it is so odd. I will say, what they gave up for Trae Young was an absolute fleece. They gave up, literally nothing. 2 expiring contracts, and you get Trae Young. Is Trae Young the asset he was 5 years ago? Hell no. But it's still Trae Young. He's still he's a solid NBA player. And you gave up, literally nothing for him. And then you go and you trade for Anthony Davis, which, again, they didn't really give up that much for Anthony Davis. They still gave up some, but they didn't give up, anything crazy. Which, again, is, pretty good business. But I guess my thing is, what do you plan on doing with this? Your new guys are Anthony Davis and Trae Young. Do you really think that's going to win you basketball games? Do you really think that you're going to... you might make the play. You're not doing anything. You're not winning a chip. You're probably not even making it out of the first round of the playoffs. You're probably going to be a play-in team. Trae Young has lived in the play-in. since that one conference finals run, and the only reason he made it was because Ben Simmons decided to poop his pants on the biggest stage of his life and ruin his career. So, like, you got perennial play-in superstar Trae Young, and you got the dude who can't stay healthy, Anthony Davis, and those are your new guys. It's like I had this analogy where it was like it's like if you had a friend who his outfits were trash. You know, seemed like every year he just kind of kept pulling up, and his just outfits were just they were just never that good. They were just ass. And then one day he decides, you know what? I'm gonna get better. I'm gonna get a better wardrobe. So then he goes to Marshalls and he buys a bunch of True Religion, spends all his money on True Religion, and then he comes back to you and he's like, yeah, check the fit. Yeah, I'm in the game now. Yeah, I'm out with the old bullshit. I'm in with this new shit, and it's just all True Religion. And it's like I see the effort. I see what you're trying to do here. But that's still not gonna work, bro. Like maybe 6 years ago your fits will go hard, but we're in the big 2026, brother. That ain't gonna work. And that's how I kind of feel about whatever's going on in Washington. I mean, like, yeah. So basically, they went from being a bottom feeder to a play-in team. So shout out them. I guess shout out Wizards fans, because I guess now you technically have something to root for. You technically have they'll get people in the door. I would go watch. I'd definitely go watch the Pacers play the Wizards, just to go see whatever goes on between Trae Young and Anthony Davis. Just why not? Like I said, they're not going to win anything, but you know what? Shout out them. They're trying. I guess the other biggest trade was the Jaren Jackson Jr. trade, which I did not see coming. I didn't even know Jaren Jackson Jr. was on the market. I thought that was like, obviously when they traded Desmond Bane, I think that was a sign that the Grizzlies were kind of wanting to blow it up a little bit. They were kind of starting to realize that things weren't working with what they had. It seemed like every year they were like always like a top 3 seed at some point in the season, and then they would either fall apart or they'd make the playoffs as a top 3 seed and then lose in the first round. They just never seemed to like see any type of success. And then they traded away Desmond Bane, and I think a lot of NBA fans kind of knew it was the beginning of the end. And we all thought it'd be Ja Morant. We all thought he would be the first head to roll, so to speak. And then they end up shipping Jaren Jackson Jr. to Utah for a pretty sizable haul. I think they got 3 firsts, maybe a second round pick. They got Walter Clayton Jr. I think the Grizzlies fleeced. I think if they can get a decent haul for Ja Morant, then I think they're in prime position to be a really solid young team. Because you already got Edey, who when he's healthy is a baller. Coward is hooping this year. And then you also got Jalen Wells, who almost won Rookie of the Year last year. So you got a pretty good solid core there. And then you also bring in Walter Clayton Jr., who streets are saying is the worst offender in the NBA, but you could teach defense maybe. And then you also got a treasure trove of picks that you could then potentially bring in some very solid guys, kind of like literally what the Oklahoma City Thunder did. And then on top of that, like the Bane trade you did this summer, you got 4, so you've got 7 first-round picks, and I don't even know how many seconds over over the next how many years. Like that's a lot of dudes you can bring in. You're bound to hit on at least a couple of those, not even including your own first-round picks that you got. So I think the Grizzlies fleeced. I don't know if I'm alone in this, but I feel like Danny Ainge, he's the GM of the Jazz, where Jaren Jackson Jr. went, I feel like he's lost a step a little bit. I feel like back, I don't know, what was that, like 5-10 years ago? I feel like we used to fear Danny Ainge. I feel like the way he was moving when he worked for Boston, he was he was making trades and he was milking people for something to the point where you thought he might have blackmail on people. The way he was getting so much in return for so little. The one I can think of the most is at the time, the Aaron Nesmith trade where they sent Nesmith to the Pacers for Malcolm Brogdon, and everyone was like, "Oh, they traded a paperclip for Malcolm Brogdon." But that's how he was moving back in the day. And I just feel like I feel like he lost this one. I feel like he got fleeced. But we'll see. Definitely don't sleep on Utah. Again, they're another like bottom feeder team that kind of has a pretty good young core. Keontae George is hooping. Isaiah Collier is an assist machine. Bryce Sensabaugh is a bucket. I didn't even mention the Grizzlies got Taylor Hendricks too. I didn't even remember that. Sorry. But then they got Jaren Jackson. They got Markkanen. They got Walker Kessler. Like, the Jazz definitely aren't. They aren't chumps. What else we got here? I found it kind of funny that Trace Jackson Davis got traded for just 1 second-round pick. I'm not like an IU hater. I just find it funny because I don't know why I find that funny. I'm sorry, Trace Jackson Davis. I know you're from Indy, and I'm supposed to support my Indy guys, but I found that silly. No Giannis. We were sold the idea that Giannis was going to be the big ticket item. Oh, they're going to go. Giannis is getting traded. They're doing all this. Blah, 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 blah. Giannis. Bro didn't get moved again. The Giannis saga in Milwaukee is starting to become like a toxic relationship that like your friends have. Like you have a friend who is constantly arguing with their girlfriend and they're constantly talking about breaking up, but then they just never seem to do it. And you're like, oh my God, are you guys going to break up or what's going on here? That's what's happening with Giannis, and it's starting to get pretty annoying because I feel like every like few weeks, it's like Giannis wants out and he wants to go to New York. Everyone's like, oh my God. And then like 3 weeks go by and then they're like, Giannis wants to retire a buck. And then 2 weeks go by and it's like, Giannis has told Shams Charania he wants a new home. It's like, oh my God. It's like, are you guys going to break up or not? And part of me likes to think that the reason why this whole relationship in Milwaukee has become so unstable is because Miles Turner. I like to think this is all Miles Turner's fault. I like to think that he ruined the Milwaukee Bucks. That would make me very happy. And that thought does make me very happy. And it would make me even more happy if, when they do finally get rid of Giannis, if Miles Turner got traded to some bottom feeder in basically a salary dump trade. That would make me very happy. Like if he got shipped to like, I don't know who sucks, the Brooklyn Nets for cash considerations. You know what I mean? Like some like kind of like fuck you trade. But yeah, so no Giannis, no Ja. Those were kind of the two big names that everyone was saying was going to get traded. We didn't see either of that. Anything else before I get into the Big Z? Cam Thomas got just waived. This offseason, I think he was an unrestricted free agent. He was a free agent this offseason, and he was basically demanding like $20 to $24 million from the Brooklyn Nets. And they were like, no. And I think he was restricted because basically the verbiage was like, if you think you can go get it from somewhere else, and we'll think about matching it. Lo and behold, he did not get that from anywhere else. And I believe he ended up taking a qualifying offer for like $6 million. So he went on this whole tirade about how he, is worth all this money, and then he gets $6 million. And now, halfway into the season, he's cut. He gets released by the Brooklyn Nets. The $24 million man himself is no longer on an NBA team, which is kind of crazy because he is a bucket. Cam Thomas is a hooper, but he's like the most inefficient hooper ever. Like, he'll put up like 30 points. And you're like, damn, Cam Thomas, 30 points. And then you see he took like 40 shots to get it. Like that boy would just be running down the court and chucking the ball up. And then he like gets all these like insane high scoring games. And everyone's like, oh my God. It's like, yeah, but he took 50,000 shots to get there. So I thought that was pretty funny. Quickly, the Celtics. Vucevic. Vucevic on that Celtics team is kind of scary. And the Celtics in general are scary because they were supposed to not be good this year. And now I think they're like tied for second, or they're like third in the East. And Jason Tatum's allegedly maybe coming back in like the playoffs. And then now you got Vucevic, who's like he's not super consistent, but he can give you 20 and 10 on any given night. Scary. It is scary hours in the East. Jaden Ivey got traded for Kevin Huerter, which, speaking of that trade, what's going on in Chicago? I thought when they traded, they made a couple moves, and it seemed like they were trying to clear space to like land someone with a lot of like an Anthony Davis or something. And they kind of just like they traded away Vucevic. And now I don't even know who their center is. It's like Jalen Smith is their starting center. They traded for Jaden Ivey, which I think was a great trade on Chicago's end. They traded Jaden Ivey for Kevin Huerter. Great trade. And then they traded who else? They got rid of Ayo DeSumo to Minnesota, which do not sleep on that trade. That might be the sleeper trade of the entire deadline. Like I don't think anyone's talking about Ayo DeSumo to the Timberwolves. That could be dangerous. He's like a 15 point per game scorer. That could be dangerous. So do not sleep on that one. But yeah, and then they got rid of Kobe White to the Hornets. Another trade. Do not sleep on Kobe White to the Hornets. The Hornets are on a burner right now, and then they just added a very efficient scorer in Kobe White. Don't sleep on that one. But yeah, it's like it seemed like they were trying to clear house to bring someone in, but then towards the end of the deadline, it seemed like they're now cleaning house and they're about to just go into like a tank/rebuild. I don't know what's going on in Chicago, to be honest with you. I feel like they're going to be flaming hot ass next year, unless Jaden Ivey can be who he was at the beginning of last season, and him and Giddey and Buzelis can, maybe they won't be. I don't know. But I guess that's all the funny, silly, weird trades. Now we can talk about the big Z to the I, to the big Indy. The Pacers finally got their big. And I'm very ecstatic about it. I'm not going to lie to you. I was under the impression that we were going to get Walker Kessler. That's kind of the name I kept seeing floating around. And that's the name that to me made the most sense. Especially after they just traded for Jaren Jackson Jr. I was like, you got Lauri Markkanen, you got Jaren Jackson Jr., you got Yusuf Nurkic, and you got Walker Kessler. I was like, I think you can get rid of one of those guys. And I thought we'd be able to offer a decent package for Walker Kessler, but it seemed like Utah was pretty adamant about sticking with their guy. And, I said it last year. There was two things I said last year. Thing one, during the Indiana Pacers historic playoff run, I said to Naomi, this is in the middle of their playoff run. I said the Pacers are never going to win a championship with Miles Turner as their center. This is when they're like on their way to the finals. I was like, yeah, but we're never winning a championship with Miles Turner as their center. And the second thing I said, I don't know if this was earlier in the season or during the playoffs, I said, we need Zubac. I said, that's who we need. We need a 15 and 10 guy who's an all NBA defensive player. That's who we need in the paint. And I said that last year. And I'm not saying Kevin Pritchard stole my idea. Chad Buchanan. You're welcome. You're welcome for that one. But yeah, we finally got him. In my opinion, massive upgrade from Miles Turner. I think that Zubac and Halliburton are it's gonna be generational. Like I said, he's already a force in the paint. He's already a great rebounder. And he's already scoring 15 points per game without Halliburton. I would not be surprised if next year Zubac was a 20 to 22 and like 13 rebounds a game type of player, because that's the Halliburton effect. So it will be absolutely, it'll be a movie next year, an absolute movie. What we had to give away though was we did have to ship Benedict Mathurin, which I think most Pacers fans knew that was coming. Like all of last season, the kind of commentary around Benedict Mathurin was that he didn't really fit within our system. You know, the Pacers are a very ball movement heavy team. We rely a lot on ball movement, finding the open guy, finding the right shot. Whereas Benedict Mathurin's more of an ISO player. You know, he's more of a give me the ball and let me work type of guy. And do not get it twisted. He's good at it. Especially in the playoffs last year, there was multiple games where I'd be like, man, we need a bucket right now. And then we just give the ball to Benedict Mathurin, and he'd cut to the rim and, like, no problem. Just get to the foul call. Get to the free throw line. Or make it, you know what I mean? Like, he was not afraid to put his head down and drive at three guys and go up. There was many times in the Benedict Mathurin experience where he would just kind of come down the floor and 7 seconds into the shot clock, throw up top of the key three. And it was like, okay. And when, you know, every now and again when he'd make it, you'd be like, this dude he's him. But the majority of the time when he missed it, you'd be like, what is wrong with this guy? So yeah, it'll be sad to see him go. I don't know if you guys noticed, the water bottle's kind of blocking it right now, but I have if you're watching the video, I have three trading cards up here on display. I have a Jonathan Taylor rookie card, Gem Mint 10. I have a Tyrese Halliburton Silver Prism. It's an 8 rookie card. And then next to it, I actually have, I'll pick it up and hold it. It's a 2022 Prism Benedict Mathurin Purple Fast Break PSA Mint 9. I don't know if you can see it. I'm holding it to the camera. I'm kind of far from the camera, but I'm holding it up. It's numbered 36 out of 75. This card was one of many that I bought back in, it would have been 2020. It would have been before the start of his third season, I believe. Yeah, it was last summer. Yes, it was before the start of his third season. I loaded up on a lot of Benedict Mathurin cards. I was pretty into card collecting at that point. I still kind of am into it. Like, I don't really buy any slabs or anything like that, but I still rip cards sometimes. But no, I was buying a lot of Benedict Mathurin stuff because I thought he was next up. I'll be honest with you. I thought he was going to be like most improved player at the end of last season. So I bought a lot of his stuff, hoping the value would go up. Like, I think this card right here that I'm holding in my hand, I think it was 40-ish. It was like $40-ish, which is the most I have paid for a card. I did buy a dual rookie auto Brady Quinn and Jamarcus Russell card for like $75, but that was like years ago. That's when I didn't really understand cards. I just saw it and was like, oh, sick, and bought it. But yeah, that was the most I spent on a card. Like I said, I thought he would ball out. His prices would skyrocket. So I have a bunch of Benedict Mathurin cards, which I guess now we need to switch that card out for something else. So I guess look out for that next episode. And I don't know if I want to sell all of his stuff or what, but we'll see. But yeah, it was kind of sad to see Benedict Mathurin go. It was understandable. We all knew it was coming, but didn't make it any more sad. I'm actually excited for him. I don't know what just happened there. I'm excited for him to go to the Clippers. I'm glad he got traded to a Western Conference team, so that way I can actually root for him. Because if he would have got traded somewhere within the East, it might have been a little difficult to root for him, especially if he becomes an all-star level player. And it's like, man, now we got to go through Benedict Mathurin in the playoffs. So glad he went to the West, so that way if he does become an all-star level player, we don't got to worry about him unless they make it to the finals, and we do too. So, yes, I think that's all I got on the NBA trade deadline. Very, very interesting. Not necessarily what I expected. I didn't even talk about the Pacers trading away their pick. But I don't really need to go into that. They traded away the first-round pick this year, but they put a bunch of protections on it, so we'll see how that pans out. The goal is still we need to lose as many games as possible. That's still the goal for the Pacers. Lose as many games as possible. Okay. To close out the show here, I want to kind of end on a introspective note. I say introspective like that because in one of my practice episodes, I think I said the word introspective like probably 4 or 5 times in like 30 to 45 seconds. And I had Naomi listen to it to let me know what she thinks. She's like, why the hell did you say introspective so much? So now, it's kind of an inside joke, I guess. But I wanted to kind of end on like a, more of a insightful topic because I feel like, doing it. And what I want to talk about is what defines success. And it's something that I think about very often. I feel like a lot of us think about things like this in this nature fairly often. And I feel like sometimes our definition of it can negatively affect our lives. And what I mean by that is oftentimes we attribute success to material things. We measure our level of success based off of tangible material objects. And oftentimes, it's our house, our car, the amount of money we have in the bank. These things quantify our success. And I feel like that's a dangerous trap to get caught up in because based off my own personal experience, new shiny things, it does give you that kind of boost or jolt of excitement, but it's fleeting. So if we base our success based off of our acquisition of these material things, our feeling of success will also be fleeting. Does that make sense? Like I remember when I bought my car. I bought my car like 2 years ago. The first 6 months, you're like, yeah, look at this sick old ride I got. But then it eventually wears off because you get used to it. It's no longer the new cool shiny thing. It just kind of is a thing. Same thing with getting a big house or getting a high paying job. You attribute your self-worth and your success to your high paying job. And, you keep telling yourself oh man, if I get this job that pays me X amount of money, if I get the big salary, the big promotion, whatever, then I'll be a success. And, you might get it. You get that success, you feel super accomplished, whatever. And then eventually that just becomes a norm. It eventually just becomes normal to have that job. So then you fall back into that trap of, oh, well, I need the bigger promotion. I need uh, the higher salary than what I have now. So you find yourself in this trap where you're never satisfied because you you want the material thing to validate your success, and then you will sometimes get that material thing, and then but because you've conditioned your mind to um, validate your success through material objects, the thing about material objects is there's always bigger and shinier ones. No matter how big and how shiny your new thing is, there's always something bigger and shinier. There's always someone with more money. There's always someone a step ahead of you. So if you've convinced yourself that getting to a certain step is the answer to all your problems, you're just going to get to that step, and then you're going to still be in that mindset of like, okay, well, I need to get to the next step. I think I was listening to Amine. He's a rap artist, and he put it very well. He says at the end of one of his songs, I believe it's Fetus off his album Limbo. He says that, I don't know it verbatim, but basically what he says is we think that being kind is a waste of time, and that we should be getting money, we should be getting cars, we should be chasing girls, whatever it may be. And sometimes in life, you get those things. But then now you're just a person who has those things. And then it's like, what's next? And at the end of the song, he's like, well, I've never had a grapefruit by itself before. And, just kind of like the joke of like, like these like small things are the importance. And I think that's a very good way to look at it. Is we often tell ourselves that we need to be chasing these things or doing more. And especially as a young man, I feel like hustle culture is a very prominent thing within young men. You get on social media, and like I even fell into this trap. When I used to use Twitter, I followed a bunch of like business dudes, and are just like all day just spewing about how like you need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You need to be doing this, that, and the third to get yourself ahead. You need to be pulling yourself out the mud. Oh, you're not working hard. Blah, blah, like all of this bullshit about how you need to be doing all this stuff because you need to be successful. Oh, you're young and you're not working every waking hour of the day. Like you're a failure. And it's just kind of been ingrained into our brains of like, you need to be doing this. You need to be chasing money. You need to be chasing the status. You need to be chasing the cars. Like, oh, look at me. I'm 23 and I have a Lamborghini. You could too if you just hustled as hard as me. Shit like that. And it creates so much stress and it creates so much anxiety. And it's like, for what? So you can then get to that point and then just be someone who has these things now. Like, what's the point? What's the point of spending my life hustling to get to a certain point in my life? Now it's like the perfect examples. Look at billionaires, bro. You see these dudes worth billions of dollars, and yet they're still working these insane hours. They're still doing all this stuff because it's not about the money. They've just become so ingrained and so conditioned that like their entire purpose on this earth is to just hustle. That's it. That's their entire purpose, is just to get it out the mud. And I saw a video the other day that this guy was like, oh, I just had lunch with the person I want to be in 20 years. This older guy who's where I'm at in business, blah, blah, blah. And I asked him, like, you have everything, you could ever want. he's like, what's missing from your life? And he was like, oh, I missed the hustle. It's like, man, it's like, yeah, like you got to the point where everyone wants to be, and now you still wish you were hustling. I just feel like that's not the point, and that's not what success is. I personally feel like success is just doing things that speak to your soul. Not to sound like a hippie, but I believe within all of us, if we're able to quiet our minds and turn off all the bullshit, all the noise that's going on around us, all the people in our phones telling us what we need to be doing and what we need to be stressing about, if we quiet all that, our intuition, it'll tell us where we need to be. It'll pull you in the direction in which you're supposed to go. And I feel like embarking down that path into the unknown, into the scary, not the road less taken, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I feel like that's true success. And I feel like if you lean into that and you lean into the work of chasing whatever it is you feel pulled to do, you will find true success. You won't worry about the numbers. You won't worry about bank statements. You won't worry about faster cars, bigger houses, promotions. You will just feel satisfied and grateful to just be pursuing what you feel like you're destined to pursue in a way. And the reason why I want to talk about this week is because I kind of ran into that myself with this show. The first episode, like I said, it got a lot more views than I thought it was going to. And for me, that felt like the success. That felt like the win, was seeing the big number. But then going into the second episode, I mentioned I had a lot of anxiety because I felt like I needed to one up my last success, which was 5 times more than I even expected to get. But now I'm feeling like I need to one up it, to feel successful. Because if you go to 60 listeners and then you drop down to 20, if you're so reliant on the numbers to quantify your success, now you're a failure, and we can't have that. We can't be a failure. So I kind of had to take a step back and really think about what does success of this show mean to me. And I think I've already succeeded. I think the success is just in the doing. When you make that decision and when you take that leap and you truly take the leap, that's the success. Continuing to put in the work no matter what. That's success. The numbers, the plays, the listens, the followers, all that shit, that's a byproduct of the work. That is not within your control. You can't control if people want to listen to your show and follow you on social media. That's not within your control. But what is within your control is putting in the work no matter what. And I think that along with quieting your mind and finding out what it is that truly does excite you, I feel like you put those two together, and that's where you find true success. Not chasing money, not chasing numbers on a screen or dollars in a bank account. it's committing yourself to the work and listening to your heart and pursuing that no matter what. So I think that's a good spot to end the show. Once again, I want to thank everybody for listening all the way through. I've got a few friends that, have like actually supported the show, and, shout out you guys. I actually had my first fan interactions this week. Met a couple ladies who said they love the show. Shout out y'all. No, they were both Naomi's friends, but I will say, check the demographics. My fan base is predominantly women, so shout out ladies. Shout out y'all for pulling up, chilling with me for an hour, listening to me yap. Send in some emails, ladies. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know what y'all want to hear. Y'all are the ones that keep showing up. So if you keep showing up, let me know what you want to hear. Don't make it too fruity, but we'll talk. We'll talk about what you got. So let me know. Is there anything else I want to say before we get out of here? No. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. I feel very good about this episode. Hopefully you liked it as well. Like I said, use the email to your advantage. Email into the show. Let me know what you want to hear. Let me know what you want me to talk about. If I like it, I'll bring it on the show. Follow me on Instagram. Follow me on TikTok, The Drew Kennington Show. Subscribe to the YouTube. Like the video. And that's all I got. Peace.